The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the individuals participating in the show. All persons described or mentioned in the podcast should be considered innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. This podcast contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions along with adult language, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
On September 23rd, 2009, a man is seen working in his parents' garage in Carrollton, Georgia. By the next day, he disappears without a trace. He left behind many possessions, including his cell phone, and though his vehicle was missing, it was later found in Chattanooga, Tennessee, with a stolen license plate attached. No trace of him has ever been found, no suspects, no answers. Just a complete mystery. You're listening to the Mysterious Brews podcast, and we bring you the case of Brian Wehrle.
Well, it has been more than a decade since an Atlanta man vanished. A crime podcast recently featured Brian Wehrle's disappearance, sparking renewed interest in a case that's gotten very little attention. 11 Alive's Cody Alcorn spoke to a detective working Brian's case along with his niece. He joins us tonight in studio. And Cody, while Brian lived in Atlanta, we understand Carrollton police are investigating his disappearance.
That's right, Jennifer. Back in September of 2009, when catastrophic flooding hit the city, Brian had a probate court hearing in Carrollton. He needed to sign some papers on his parents' estate, a 45-minute drive that took him 4 hours due to the flooding. He was determined to make this hearing. While Brian made it to Carrollton, he never...
Welcome to a deep, dark, dank, moist basement somewhere in the bowels of Georgia. Well, Coachum, it's been a minute. So good news is during the rewind fall break, we were able, I talk like, you were there helping me, but we were able to catch up on our mailing room shit that I've been trying to get done. And we finally cracked the code with our longtime listener north of the border. She finally got her package. I think I've sent, that would have been the third or fourth one I've sent that kept kind of disappearing.
At least the third or fourth time you've said you sent it.
Well, no, I did say, what's funny is the guy at the post office, I know him, and he was like, going to Canada again? I was like, yeah, we're going to try it one more time. But anyway, so hopefully everyone has received their stickers and goodies and all that jazz. Had some T-Third design that if you are not a member of our Facebook group page, then you missed the chat and the designs that we're looking at dropping right in time for the holidays.
I like it. I like those designs.
Yeah, that is courtesy of my wife during our anniversary pub crawl. She was like, how can I help you? And I was like, well, you can help me by figuring out how to do some T-shirt designs. So maybe it get her involved. Anyway, your Giants, you said, is not handling it.
Dude, they suck, man. They're like 2-6. But the Vols won yesterday, beat Kentucky.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did.
After losing to Alabama for the 900th time in my lifespan.
Yeah, I thought Tennessee was going to upset them in Tuscaloosa, and then, typical Saban teams, they find that extra gear, so.
I'm not blaming the refs, but, man, good Lord, there were a bunch of holding calls they didn't call.
There were, what was it? There was one. I saw like a couple of plays from that game, and then somebody posted this morning that one play from the Georgia-Florida game where that kid running back gets face masked like 3 times. But even they didn't call any of that. But I will say, Georgia came out on the right end of that 4th down spot or 3rd down spot when they said he was just short. But anyway, all right, that's enough of our mysterious college football podcast.
College football brews.
That's right, baby. All right, so we are looking at the case of Brian Wehrle, and Coach happened to see a billboard.
Yeah, I've never heard of this case until I moved recently, and now I have to take the interstate home, and the billboard right on my exit is a billboard for him. I started looking into it, and it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and I had worked down near where this kind of went down and had never heard of it. So basically, this is one right under our nose that we never knew about. But we're talking about Brian Wehrle, who was born in 1970.
Well, it just goes to show you, whoever has paid for that billboard, I mean, it might not have solved the case, but it's getting attention. I mean, people are noticing it because I'm pretty damn oblivious to things. And if I've noticed it, then I guarantee other people have noticed it, because I'm pretty close to Chattanooga now, so I know why the billboard's placed there.
I didn't think about that when you first said that you had seen the billboard, but that makes more sense now why it's where it's at.
Yeah.
Now, Brian Wehrle could be described as clever and a jokester. He graduated from Carrollton High School and went on to the University of West Georgia. Brian stood 5'7" and weighed 140 pounds. He had blonde hair and blue eyes and a wandering soul, to quote his ex-roommate Scott. Now, there are not too many people that drive around in a bright yellow Honda S2000 car with their little Dachshund dog hanging out of over the door of it. But this was his personality, and we'll post that picture on our socials so that you get an idea of what kind of personality he had. But he was unapologetically himself, and that bright yellow Honda S2000 convertible stood out like a sore thumb in Carrollton, so everybody knew who he was when he was driving around. Now, Brian had taken some geology classes that he really enjoyed while he was at West Georgia. His family stated that he had a giving personality, and when his brother Chris needed help with his land surveying company in Atlanta, Brian left college to become an employee at Due West Surveying Incorporated. Just as his adult life took off, Brian's life changed in a big way. Now, Brian had come out to his family and after some time met Jeffrey Rolston, who became his longtime partner. Quote, Jeffrey fit in perfectly with the family, end quote, his brother-in-law told local newspapers. The two lived in the Virginia Highland area of Atlanta in a cottage on Morningside Drive. Jeffrey worked for Bell South, which, as everyone knows, is now AT&T. As the two made their life together, they eventually were faced with taking care of each one's parental units. And it was a task that would call Brian to leave his brother's company and spend time between his fast-paced life in Atlanta and Carrollton. And at the same time, Jeffrey was having to deal with aging parents as well. Now, Brian's father passed away, and when this happened, Brian and his siblings decided to place their mother in a personal care home. But Brian was tasked with being his mother's guardian and conservator. So he takes care of the family home on Crescent Drive where he grew up, and a couple of his siblings help him since he lives in the city. Now, Brian is 39 at the time, making his family his top priority, including his husband, in what seems to be setting his life aside in the process. Now, he had big dreams of doing something else. He loved helping people. His relationship with his partner/husband, Jeff, was great, according to what I have read. And Brian was getting to where he was able to spend more and more time back in Atlanta at home with Jeff. Now, it was around this time that Jeff's mother had moved in with Brian and Jeff and was staying in an extra bedroom in their home. Now, on September 21st, 2009, Brian had come into Carrollton and spoke with his niece, Amanda Rickles. She stated in an interview with WJBF in Carrollton, quote, I talked to him after he had been cutting grass the next day when he was taking a break and going to Taco Bell. Now, that evening, he made a trip to the family home on Oak Drive to use their computer. I'm sorry, not the family home. He had his sister's home, whose last married name is Gay. So he goes over there to use their computer. Quote, he had told us while he was at our house that he was worried about getting home, how he was going to get home. So he was going to go to Walmart or somewhere and try to buy a topographical map, Spencer, the brother-in-law, explains. This is not something most people would do, but keep in mind that Brian is a geological surveyor, so he is more than capable of discerning a topographical map as a way to get home. So he leaves his sister and brother-in-law's house, and then heads back to his parents' house, which all of this is still in Carrollton. And that night, a neighbor reported seeing someone in the garage. Now, like you heard in the opening, it was around this time that Atlanta experienced a huge flood, and the surrounding counties were flooded as well. So the drive back from his parents' home in Carrollton to his home in Atlanta should have been about a 45-minute drive. But due to the flooding, it took, depending on what you read, either 3 or 4 hours for him to get home. The city of Atlanta and the metro counties were just not prepared for the amount of rain that came down. And interstates were shut down. People were sleeping in their cars on the side of a lot of highways. Roads were being shut down, and roads were being washed out. So there was just a deluge that just kept coming. Now, nothing really significant happens on September 22nd due to Brian basically staying at the house so that he can monitor the floodwater that is rising from a lake that is behind his parents' home. On September 23rd, he goes to his sister Anita's house, and Amanda Rickles, that's his niece, but they were like best friends. And so they were expecting that, well, I'm sorry, not expecting him. She was expecting. And so Amanda and Brian had been planning a baby shower. So the mom-to-be loved pickles. So Brian and Amanda were trying to do some kind of pickle-themed baby shower party. Now, yeah, which is crazy, but I tell this.
Hey, if you love pickles, I mean, come on.
That's true. So I include this in the story because basically Brian and Amanda were in constant contact during this whole time. So they were calling, bouncing ideas off each other. They were, see, hey, I found this. What if we do this? Da-da-da-da-da. But anyway, and this was that whole week when he came into town. He was standing there at his parents' house trying to get the yard mowed before the floodwaters came in. Then he's monitoring the lake. And so him and Amanda are constantly talking. Somewhere between 3 to 5 in the afternoon, after cutting the grass and after going to Taco Bell, he went to Anita's house. Now, that was where he used the computer. And he's using it to look up stuff for the baby shower. And so he calls Amanda and said he had some really good ideas for the shower. They chat. What the hell is that? Oh. All of a sudden, I get like this notification on my screen. I'm like, what? Is the internet down? No shit. But it's not. Anyway, back to the story. So he calls Amanda, bouncing some ideas off of her. They talk for a few minutes. He calls her a second time later in the evening, but this time she misses that call and it goes to voicemail. Amanda calls him back, but Brian misses that call. So as Brian is leaving Anita's house, he calls Amanda and leaves her a voicemail. Now, the working theory is that this is the last call he made to his family. But you have to take in mind, he could have contacted his partner, Jeff, to let him know he was headed back to Atlanta and he was trying to navigate all the flooded interstates and roads and stuff like that. However, I could not find anything in my research that stated if Jeff ever said he called him or if this truly was the last time Brian talked to anyone. So when Amanda returns the call, it goes straight to voicemail, but she's not really worried about it and figures that she'll just talk to Brian again the next day. As Brian is leaving Anita's house, this is when all this transpires. So that was the 23rd. So on September 24th, 2009, around 9 a.m., Brian is scheduled to be in probate court at the Carroll County Courthouse to sign financial paperwork on his mother's estate, one that is estimated at around $1 million.
Not bad.
Not bad, but he is one of 9 or 10 kids, so it's still not.
Yeah, I think it was 10 kids. No, wait, I don't know.
Yeah, he's either one of 9. I don't remember.
He's got a few brothers and sisters.
Just a tad. So the odd thing is Brian doesn't show up for court. And a friend of his sister's, Anita, calls Anita to let her know that Brian was a no-show on the court docket. And Anita stated that it was at that time that she began calling Brian. Now she's getting no answer, so she heads over to the parents' house where he was staying. Brian is nowhere to be seen, but his medicine, his overnight bag are all still in the house. Their mother's car that Brian had been driving is also gone. Now, the car was a 1992 light blue 4-door Buick LeSabre. I mean, it's a land yacht.
Yeah, that's a boat.
Yeah. Anita tells the media that, quote, I know for a fact his cell phone was there. There was money there. There was cash, end quote. Now, I think she goes on to state to the same newspaper, quote, I think one of the people who was actually reporting him missing was his partner who lived in Atlanta, Jeff. I do remember him coming to the police department one day and talking to a Detective Johnson. Captain Shannon Cantrell with the Carrollton Police Department's Criminal Investigation Division stated that Jeff was a very good, nice guy. Nothing stuck out to kind of lead them to believe that it was a lover's quarrel or anything like that. And he said that the Carrollton had very few missing people and that this case kind of stuck with him. And so we get into what we've talked about on this podcast a bajillion times, and that is Brian is an adult. He can come and go as he pleases. So when you try to report him, the family tries to report him missing in Carrollton. And they're like, he doesn't live here, so why are you reporting him missing here? He'll have to actually be reported missing from his home in Atlanta if he doesn't arrive back. But keep in mind, he's an adult. He can do whatever the hell he wants to. Now, Brian had some insomnia issues, so he was up very late. His brother-in-law, Scott, stated that not only was Brian having those insomnia issues, he also had narcolepsy, which is a deadly combination. And police narrowed down the timeline of Brian disappearing to between 2:30 a.m. and 9 a.m. on September 24th, 2009. They arrived at this time frame due to a neighbor seeing someone resembling Brian at 2 a.m. in the family's garage. When authorities dig more into the sighting of Brian, it is discovered that one story is that only a light was seen on in the garage, while another story is that a neighbor actually saw who they believe to be Brian in the garage. Whichever occurred, the neighbors do tell authorities that when they left for work the next morning around 8 a.m., the big Buick LeSabre was not in the driveway. Now, there is mention in some of the articles on Brian's case that there were 2 receipts found in the family home. And this is this whole thing with the receipts is just odd. One of them is from Taco Bell, basically stating that he was where he said he was, and his niece's, I guess, account of the day matches with the receipt. The other one is a receipt that he could not find previously, and he was really upset about not being able to locate it. And it was something that he needed during the upcoming hearing the next day, because he needed all of this paperwork and these receipts from doctors' offices and everything together for the court. The missing receipt was not something significant, but more or less it was just like he couldn't get over the fact he couldn't find that receipt. So he stressed to the max, that receipt is like the straw that breaks the camel's back. And so he's in a fury about that. And when his niece Amanda spoke to him earlier in the week, he stated, quote, "I have to still find this one thing, and it's annoying the out of me," end quote. Now, not only did Brian suffer from narcolepsy and insomnia, he also suffered from rheumatoid arthritis. And it was so severe at times that he was scared to take a bath when he was home by himself, because he worried he wouldn't be able to lift himself out of the bathtub.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah, it is. Now, he wanted to make...
I don't mean to change the subject, but as you said, bathtub and lifting yourself out, man. Did you hear about Matthew Perry?
Yeah, dude.
Sad.
It is sad. They said, well, we'll save that for later. But anyway,
they said what?
They said
we'll forget, you know it.
They said that he had battled addiction to Vicodin, and getting in that hot water after exercising kind of rushed all the blood, and he could have had a massive heart attack and just fell over and drowned.
Ugh, it's awful.
It is, man. Now, back to Brian's case, he wanted to make sure that someone was there with him when he bathed, and most of the time he wanted to make sure his partner Jeffrey was there. And the other thing that's odd about this is when the sister goes to the mother's house where Brian's staying, all of, in air quotes, Brian's life-saving medications were left at the house, which leads you to believe that this is not someone that just decided, I'm going to just leave and start a new life. He also had a heart condition, and he wore a pacemaker. He had suffered from heart palpitations, and in 2009, earlier, he had to, this is how bad or old this is, he would have to hook up something. It never went in, but somehow he had to hook something up to a landline phone so that it could check to make sure his pacemaker was working properly.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's
even in 2009, who had landlines?
I know. So it would be extremely odd for Brian just to leave without saying anything and leave all of his medicine behind, his phone behind, and the little device that he needed to check his pacemaker. This kind of shoots, like I said, the theory that he just ran away to start a new life down in a heap of flames. Now, initially, when Brian's brothers and sisters see that he missed probate court on the estate, they contact local authorities, and this is where the family's told they can't report him missing and that he's an adult. He can come and go as he pleases. And so they try to explain to the authorities that Brian had not been gone. Authorities try to explain to the family that Brian hadn't been gone long enough, and that if anyone was going to make the missing filing, it would have to be Jeffrey in Atlanta. So he does. I think he waits to the next day, and since he was supposed to be home, that's what they're, due to the floodwaters, so that's his thing. So he makes the missing report. Now, another oddity is that when Brian no-shows at the court hearing, one of his sisters goes to the parents' home, like we said, and this is where she discovers everything of his still there. But around the same time that she makes it to the house, at 11 a.m., the mom's house's water bill is paid for. Now, this is where, again, depending on what you read or what you listen to, there's a couple of YouTube videos on Brian's case, but it's either some people say that like he paid it at 11 a.m. on September 24th. Other people say that he had prepaid it, the water bill, ahead of time, and he had actually overpaid, and this 11 a.m. transaction was a refund back to his account. So nobody really knows. That would be one of the things that I would love for anyone connected to this case to let us know. Was that a refund, or was it actually a payment? Whether it was electronic or whether it was in person, that would lead you to believe that he was still alive at that time. Now, another goofy little thing is, and I guess this goes basically just to squash the fact that he was going to run away and he hated life and all this stuff. Him and his partner Jeff were planning this big vacation that was about to occur. And this is something that Brian constantly talked about to family and friends. And they come back with, well, maybe it was suicide. And friends and family are like, no, there's no way. Now, while he was stressed about the estate and the probate court, he was about to have all of that taken off his plate, and then he had been planning that vacation, and that's what his big release was going to be. I got all this done. We're going on vacation. I can relax. So, again, that kind of takes suicide out of it. Now, when Jeff calls to report the missing person or file the missing persons report, since there was no signs of a struggle at his parents' home in Carrollton, and he left all of his medicine, his phone, his clothes, everything, this is what Jeff uses to catapult not waiting the 48 hours that he was initially told that he had to wait. And he was like, nope, if he was headed to me, he would have been here by now, but it appears that something has happened and he is missing. So authorities do take it. They actually start looking for the car. Now, since Jeff and him are, I don't know at this time if they were technically married. I can't remember when that law passed. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But basically, since Jeff is the spouse, he's the one primarily dealing with authorities and doing the interviews with media concerning Brian's disappearance. Now, Brian's niece, Amanda, states that the family respected this and there was no animosity between the family and Jeff. And they didn't want to talk to media and cause a problem about he said, she said, and people get confused. So they allowed Jeff to handle everything from the official side. Amanda stated that she was expecting to be contacted by authorities since she was the last person, she assumed, to officially talk to Brian. Now, Amanda states that it was going on 2 weeks since Brian disappeared, and she still had not been contacted by authorities. So she asked her aunt if anyone has checked Brian's emails. The aunt says, as far as she knows, no one has. So Amanda goes through Brian's security questions to access his email. And she just wanted to see if there was anything in his email that might lead to kind of discover where he was going or if someone had made threats or something like that. Well, to everyone's disappointment, when she does finally get into the email, that email account is just full of junk emails and chain letter type emails. So there was nothing there. Now, a few days after accessing Brian's email, Detective Tony Johnson gets in touch with Brian's sister, Anita, and tells her that they had been monitoring Brian's email and that he had just logged in, so he was alive. Anita's like, no, that is my niece, and she broke into his email account to see if there was anything suspicious in there. So Detective Johnson turns around and calls Amanda to get the password so that authorities could get into the email. And according to Amanda, Detective Johnson was working the angle that Brian's disappearance was over, quote, a lover's quarrel. which is totally 180 degrees away from what Jeff is being told. You look perplexed, sir.
I am. I'm just trying to work it all out in my head, man, and I'm just not that smart. Why are they being told different stories?
That's what I was wondering. And I wonder if he was being told, like, I guess maybe Jeff had only one contact with Carrollton, and Carrollton's telling Amanda they think it's a lover's quarrel, while Jeff is really dealing with Atlanta PD and the disappearance and the media, and has no idea that Carrollton thinks he's a suspect. But I couldn't find anything that said he was an official suspect. So that's another oddity.
Well, can he prove that he was in Atlanta at the time?
I think he could, because from what I read, I think, like I said, his mother had moved into their Virginia Highlands home, and he was basically her primary caregiver. So I think that was his alibi. Now, 2 months after Brian disappears on December 3rd, his Buick LeSabre is found. It is not found anywhere near Carrollton or his Atlanta residence. It is actually found 2 hours north in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Hence why the billboard is placed where it is.
That is correct, sir. The car was found in a less than reputable neighborhood under a streetlight. Astonishingly, the car had been reported to have been there for over a month. According to witnesses in the area that the car was found in, it was left by a black male wearing a red shirt. Another witness reported seeing a tall African-American man in his 20s with a slender build wearing dark-colored pants and a short-sleeved black shirt park the car there during the last week of October. The reason no one thought it was odd for it to be there for that long was because there was an older man on that street who worked on cars, and people would just park their car on the street and let him work on it wherever they parked it. Now, this sounds like whoever parked the car probably dumped the car there. I don't believe the person that parked the car there had anything to do with the disappearance. Maybe he was just hey buddy, here's $100 if you'll go drive this car over there and drop it off kind of guy.
Yeah, for whatever reason, I'm in agreement with you. It just doesn't seem like this person would have been involved.
No, and
they
because
may have bought a stolen car, they may have, I don't know. I like the idea that, yeah, man, I'll give you $100 if you just go park this car and leave it.
Yeah. Can you get somebody to pick you up? Like, just walk down to the stop sign, leave it here, and somebody pick you up.
Because anybody that was involved, that would be very foolish.
Yes.
Make
Agreed.
yourself seen.
Agreed.
In that manner.
Now, the tag on the vehicle was actually a stolen Tennessee tag. It did not belong to the car anywhere. Then when they run the VIN number for the car, it was reported as being the missing person, Brian Wehrle. Now, the real Georgia tags that belonged on the car were not with it. Now, the Fall Line podcast discovered from a source the tag had been run by police in another Georgia county 1 month after the disappearance. So, quote, we reached out to Coweta County 911, and the problem is it being that far back and purging records and keeping up with stuff, they were not able to determine. They knew it was ran through that agency, through Coweta County Sheriff's Office. So it was a sheriff's deputy that ran it. But we don't know where the car was at when the tag was ran, said Captain Contrell. Adding, they also did not know who the deputy was that actually ran the plates. So when they get to the car, they find another receipt for Taco Bell, a book, a container with change, and even the car keys and fingerprints, but none of them were identifiable enough to catch whoever was in the vehicle other than Brian. Now, Cantrell said the department also analyzed cell phone data, home phone records, placed Brian's information into the statewide missing persons systems, and he's recorded with the FBI. At the Crescent Drive home, there was no forced entry, and Brian, who, like I said, wore a pacemaker, suffered from severe arthritis, narcolepsy, and insomnia, left all of his life-saving medication at the home. In fact, family members reported that the bed covers were actually turned down as if he was about to get into bed, but something stopped him. Now, the GBI finally gets involved, and they take the car to be forensically processed. According to what has been released to the media, the GBI found a partial fingerprint and some fiber samples. You would think this would be good news, but partial fingerprints are not run unless they have a suspect to compare it to.
What?
Yep, I didn't know that. A lot of people have stated that the police force in Carrollton was not taking the case seriously since Brian was an adult and had the right to disappear on his own. Also, there was not a sign of a struggle or anything to lead authorities to believe that some sort of crime had occurred.
Yeah, but I mean, leaving your medicine,
that's my argument.
Pacemaker attachment or whatever it is, that would be clear sign to me that
I
he
agree
did
with
not
you.
leave on his own free will. Or if he did, it was because he was going to go end it.
Right. Now, it was not until significant pressure from the family and his partner Jeff physically driving to Carrollton to constantly ask about updates on Brian's case that authorities began to look at other angles of the case. According to his niece Amanda, Jeff passed away with authorities telling him that Brian just abandoned him, just walked out and left him completely to start a new life. So Jeff passes away within a couple of years of Brian's disappearance. But the way Amanda talks about it is they're trying to convince Jeff that Brian had just had enough of his crap and that he walked away. Now, she summarizes it with, quote, just imagine Jeff looking at his and Brian's little Datsuns knowing they were Brian's pride and joy. And you have detectives saying that he just walked away completely from their life and family. The way the police were framing it, it was to get out of the relationship with Jeff. Basically, it was so bad with you, he's got to leave and start a new life somewhere else.
I mean, wouldn't it just be easier just to break up with the guy?
Hey, this kind of goes back to like when these crazy couples try to kill the spouse and collect the insurance money. Just fucking leave them. So we get into possible theories. Was it a random crime or possibly a jealous guy that fell in love with Brian and stalked him unbeknownst to Brian? One theory is that Brian came out of a convenience store and someone made a comment. Brian pops off. The person that made the comment takes offense and an altercation occurs. Now, there is a video on YouTube that tries to play the, quote, Brian was killed, made to disappear, because Carrollton is a rural, backwoods, conservative town. They don't take kindly to gay men, end quote. And here's the thing, and I'm not even going to justify the guy's YouTube videos. There's 4 parts, and within, I think the second or third part is when he makes this dumbass comment. Obviously, this guy's never been to Carrollton and the West Georgia campus. It is one of the more liberal cities and colleges on that side of Atlanta. So just to say that since it was Carrollton, it was not Metro Atlanta, that everybody's homophobic is a little bit out there. Now, the one thing about the family home that was upsetting to Brian's friends and family was that home that he was taking care of his mother, or his mother's home. Authorities never treated it as a crime scene because supposedly there was nothing missing other than him and the car. So I think people just walked in and out, in and out, and in and out. And so anything that was in that home now is tainted. But they float this theory that it was a random act of violence. I don't see that playing out either because the flooding had everybody trying to make sure their homes and everything was taken care of. I don't see someone driving around in floodwaters thinking, hey, there's somebody in their garage. Let's go beat the shit out of them and rob them. I could be wrong. I don't have the criminal mindset.
I mean, it's possible, but you'd think that if that was true, there'd be some evidence there.
True. Now,
I
more.
mean, you're just not going to beat a man and not leave evidence.
Correct. More than 5 years after Brian's disappearance, investigators brought 3 dogs that specialize in missing persons and kind of cadaver dogs to the parents' home in Carrollton. The doggos searched the entire property, and all 3 dogs alerted to a spot near the boathouse. Authorities did excavate the area where the dogs alerted and did not find anything related to Brian. The family decided to sell the house, and in 2021, the estate was divided up amongst the remaining children. But before that could occur, Brian's brothers and sisters had to have him declared legally dead. Now, I know, man, knowing that he's missing, and then you got to get the house out of the situation, but the only way to get the house out of the situation is to declare your brother legally dead. Now, his niece, Amanda Rickles, stated that she started a crowdsourcing fund for a billboard in Carrollton in hopes of reminding people that her uncle is still missing. Funny thing is, she must have hit her goal plus some, because Coach sees the billboard near the Chattanooga line. So
yeah, I mean, it's like 2 exits before the Tennessee border.
Brian,
so they're clearly still looking for the man.
Correct. Brian's partner, like I stated earlier, Jeffrey, died without ever knowing what happened to Brian. And Brian would be 53 now. His last description at age 39 was a 5'7" white man that weighed 140 pounds with blonde hair and blue eyes. Anyone with information about the disappearance of Brian Wehrle should contact the Carrollton Police Department at 770-834-4451. This is the oddest case, I think, because if you don't have what is left at the home discovered, then it would lead you that he just left town or something happened with him driving. I see that you shoot yourself because I was about to say him driving back home, but hell, he wouldn't be driving back home because everything he had medicine-wise, and like you stated, the pacemaker thing is at his mom's house. So it just doesn't make sense that he would leave all that shit behind if he was going to just go. If it's a suicide thing, I personally just, and I don't know him personal, but just my personal opinion, his personality, I think, would have led him to leave a suicide note explaining exactly what was going on. And then you get into, did he go and try to buy that topographical map, and he, on the way to Walmart, he runs into floodwaters, car gets flooded. But then you would think when the floodwaters receded that a body would be found. So there's just a whole lot of stuff. I mean, he's gone like a fart in a dust storm gone.
Yeah, but I mean, they find the car. They find the car all the way in Chattanooga.
And that's what I wonder is why. What's the
a man died, that it flooded the car and a man drowned, and then what, some random person found the car?
Well, I guess that's my thing. What is the significance with Chattanooga? Why not just drive it into the metro area of Atlanta?
I don't know, I guess. I mean, who knows what goes through the head of somebody? They think that maybe easier to hide up there, or
maybe like crossing state lines, but still, I don't. It's just.
Well, I mean, maybe he thought nobody would be looking there.
Well, from where? Here's what I don't understand. From where that house is at in Carrollton, if you were looking to get rid of a car, you could have easily just headed west, and there's a couple of podunk little towns that you'll drive through, and then there's probably a little bit bigger town that you could have just parked it at one of those 24-hour gas stations or truck stops, and no one would have been the wiser. So I guess that's my thing with Chattanooga. What's the tie to Chattanooga? I don't know.
Well, he himself didn't have any ties.
Correct. And I don't think Jeff had any ties. I don't know, man.
I don't know.
This is a head scratcher for sure. I really hope something comes. And I wonder if that whole searching partial prints, could they not run it, search that partial print to known, not convicts, but people that have had their damn fingerprints in the system? Like, I just don't understand where that comes in at, you know?
Yeah.
You would think you could run it through whatever they call that
maybe
system.
because since it's partial, the system can't really pinpoint anything unless it has an exact match to go with.
Right, but I guess what I'm thinking is, and this is just armchair quarterbacking, is there not, with what we can do electronically now, is there not some way that you could run that through the system of people who have been in jail or convicted of petty crimes and get a list of possible matches? Like, or maybe they did and it come back with like 150 people and they're like, hell no, we ain't doing this. But I guess my thing is, I'm kind of torn on the whole, why can you not search it? But anyway. There are some other Carrollton cases that I had no idea about, and so I'm going to run those by Coach. We may be coming back to the great city of Carrollton if there's enough information. If there's not, we may do a Carrollton follow-up. I think there's 3 or 4 that I found, but I didn't go into detail. They just said that these were kind of other cases in the area. I don't know of any. I didn't either. And hell, I worked down there when we first started the podcast, so you would think people that I worked with would be like, hey, man, check this one out. This is local. But they didn't. So anyway, if you have any information about Brian's case, if you see the billboard, please, if you know anything, I mean, if you have heard just whispers, because I know there are still some people that listen in Carrollton, please drop a dime to the Carrollton Police Department. But anyway, I don't think there's a real good theory out there that I'm just going to stick a pin in. I really think, unfortunately...
Well, I don't think it was suicide. I know that much.
Right, and I don't think he walked out to start a new life because...
Not at all.
All those medicines. So it leads you to believe it was stranger danger, but to what extent? So anyway. All right. Recommendaciones. There is a second season to the Netflix Murdaugh case.
Yeah, I've been meaning to watch that.
They're about 40 minutes each. I watched the first one. I don't know, man. I got to be in the right frame of mind to finish watching it. I'm just so sick of his smug-ass picture on the news because he's pissed off because the clerk of the court, and this is what they're hanging the whole thing on with this now, he's getting a new trial, and which is probably pretty smart on the local judge's part. He could have just said hell no, and then they could have appealed it, and then it would have come back to him eventually. So I guess he's thinking, all right, fuck it, let's just go ahead and give him a new trial. But the whole reason that this is because when the clerk of the court, was escorting the jury to the jury room, she made the comment, don't be fooled by his charming ways. And that's all she said.
Yeah.
And they're considering that jury tampering. And I'm like, really? Okay. But anyway, that's my recommendation, the season 2 of the Murdaugh docuseries on Netflix. What you got, boss?
My recommendation is to go back and listen to some of our old episodes, man. When we posted that Gary Subring, that's still my favorite case. Of all the ones we've done, that's the one. And I would recommend, if you listen to that and it was the first time you heard it, go back and find episode 50 where we actually interview the man. And a wild story that was.
Yes. And I was explaining to Mr. Ed Butler, who is a patron and a follower of our podcast. He was on when Heater did his ghost story that time. Ed had never listened to it, and then his comment was it was very MIB-esque with how everything was going around. And I told him, I was like, man, go back and listen to the interview with him. I said, it'll give you more MIB vibes. So,
oh yeah.
Yeah, it was It was
When
odd.
he talks about the helicopter.
Yeah, that's no one knew about that because that's not in anything. That's us making groundbreaking discoveries right there talking to the man.
We can finally say, you heard it here first.
That's right. We were too stupid back then to say it, but we really did.
Yeah.
Well, Coach, you got anything else for the lovely boys and girls out there in podcast land?
Oh, I don't.
Deuces.